There's a handful of things you have to do, and you have to instill the culture that we're going to work together. We win as a team, we lose as a team. We have to make sure that all of our sellers and our sales leaders collaborate well around the company. And you got to say thank you 3 times for every time you hear it from somebody else, because your extended deal team that helps you win deals, many of them do not work on commission. They know that you're the most highly compensated people in the company, and they're okay with it if you're a good person.
Welcome back to the Thoughts on Selling podcast. Today, it is my pleasure to have Mike Barron join me as guest speaker. Mike has many years of sales and sales management, sales leadership experience, and we're going to take a deep dive into some theories about how to make sales work better. Mike, first question. Who is Mike Barron?
Thank you, Lee. Pleasure to be with you again. I've been in the tech sales, VC, and private equity environments for a long time. Numerous startups, successes, failures. I started out selling enterprise software and then grew up through managing teams, regions, global. And I am currently based in Denver, Colorado with my wife and 2 kids off in college. And we'll get into whatever level of depth you ask about next.
Yeah. So the focus of this podcast is sales leadership, sales management, theories about how people can sell better. And the last time we talked, Mike, we talked about effective sales leadership tactics, effective sales management tactics. I'm going to throw a hypothetical situation out for us to sink our teeth into. You and I were just hired as the CRO and VP of Sales Enablement for a well-funded security startup. You want to draw straws for who's CRO? No, you take it. You take it. What are the first 3 things we do together or separately?
It's a good place to start. Situationally dependent, of course. How healthy is the company? What's the revenue of the company? How big is the team? Is it right sized to the revenue?
It's a security company. It's healthy. Everybody needs security.
Right.
Right.
So assuming that those baselines are all decent and you have kind of a level playing field to start, first of all, I dive in right away to making sure that the compensation plans of our sellers and anybody who earns commission, their comp plan is clear, it's understandable, they know how they're making money. And we can laugh about this all day long, but I start there because, I've been in a couple of companies where I inherited a 55 or 65 page comp plan with a whole bunch of jargon. Nobody understood how they get paid, and we had to rip it up and start again.
Are you suggesting that a simple, effective compensation plan drives seller behavior?
Absolutely. And while you said that as tongue in cheek, of course, I'm a really big proponent of you have like 6 pages. 2 that explains the comp plan, 2 that walks through a couple scenarios of you sell a deal that looks and feels like X or Y or Z, and here's how you get paid, right? Crystal clear. And then there's always a couple pages of legalese, right? You have to protect the company. The CEO can make some changes if necessary, but you have to reserve a little bit of the liability side at the back end. But 2, 2, and 2 is always my goal. Okay.
What makes a good comp plan beyond the simplicity, right? So clearly you're looking to drive behavior. How do you influence specific behavior?
Well, it starts like even in my last company, it starts with how do you put behavior in the comp plan, elements of the comp plan to drive behavior that triangulates for all parties involved. So to be more specific, you might have a deal kicker that if you sell a 3-year deal or a 5-year deal or a 1-year deal, you make more or less, you get an extra bonus. Okay. Now, if the board of directors is trying to work on retention and they'd like longer term deals for steadier cash flow, longer term commits, your customer success and account management team is not constantly in retention mode, okay, and they can build a relationship and let that evolve, then you're going to pay a rep handsomely for a 5-year deal. And you're going to put certain discount parameters, of course, what's acceptable. And you're going to pay them less for a 3-year and you're going to pay them less for a 1-year. The company likes that because it triangulates with what they need done. The clients like it because they get perhaps a little bit of a price break, or even if it's not a price break, they know they're entering into a relationship. So the cadence right off the bat should be different. So if it triangulates between the client, the company, and the seller, then it's good behavior and you can promote more and more and more of it. And then you have to make sure everybody's comp plan, from a sales manager, a VP, the CRO, anybody that even is on a company bonus plan, you have to make sure that the behavior is consistent and then the compensation is consistent. And that would be a great element of a comp plan.
Okay, we just joined the company and you've done an evaluation of the comp plan. You've gone back and reviewed it. And surprisingly, it turns out that our predecessors did a fabulous job in the comp plan, right? So what's our next step?
Well, typically I'll take an immediate look at the value prop. I want to make sure that we're gathering some data from current customers. I want to talk to them. I want to find out what makes them tick. Where are we crushing it on their behalf? Where are we falling short? Everything starts with customer behavior and their feedback. If not, shame on us all, right? Because then you can only sell so much with quality for so long before it just keeps bumping up against customer expectations.
Right. It's my perspective, Mike, and I might have shared this with you earlier. It's my perspective that we can learn a tremendous amount about the strengths and weaknesses of our selling motions by asking closed lost accounts. How did we do? What were we good at? Where did we miss? What could we have done differently? What should we do differently? Did you understand our messaging? And some organizations embrace that flow of input. Many do not.
Well, what's interesting too is, and you're aware, now there are a handful of AI native startups that all they do is reach out both through AI connective tissue, but also then followed up with some real live interaction to work with lost deals to try to win them back. They either haven't made a decision yet or they did and they regret it. And there's a chance to win those deals because a lot of times a deal is lost. And then it's queued up in a CRM, closed lost. Maybe there's a couple sentences as to why. If it was a really big deal, there's more because there's history. But very little is done postmortem.
I'm aware of a number of deals in the large enterprise space that are closed, slipped,
right?
Not lost, slipped. We're going to pass on the 30% discount for a second quarter deal. We'll see you next year. And by the way, we're taking a note of what you offered us.
Right. And let's put a fine point on it. I inherited a CRM where a closed lost had an opportunity in a drop down where you can put pushed or lost. It would automatically create a new opportunity with the history and just push it out 4 quarters because it was a business with annual renewals.
Right, exactly.
And so all of a sudden the future forecast and, well, more importantly, the future pipeline was inflated because somebody might not touch that account for 9 months and then give them a jingle and say, do you have a pulse? Are you interested? And they might have moved on and you're dead and buried in their mind. So talking with lost deals, push deals, having a keep warm campaign when a deal pushes or is lost. So you really just continue to then build a relationship with a different cadence, right? The kind of cadence where you're really rebuilding. If you didn't the first time, you're building, but typically rebuilding a relationship and not pushing. So it's at a different pace. It's at a different baud rate. So you can reestablish some credibility, start to have some business conversations. You can be helpful with some insight. AI can do that. Humans can do that. But talking to current clients, talking to lost deals, that's a great, no particular order, but you asked about the top things, maybe a second thing in any order. That's an ideal scenario to figure out why you're winning and losing. And then the third, especially up front, fairly quickly in the door, have to assess the tech stack that the selling machine has put in place, right? So I've been in places you walk in and you're $100 to $200 million ARR, startup, but you've been a roll up of acquisitions. And so you really have like a $5-10 million ARR infrastructure with Zoom Info and Outlook and nothing else. But you're a couple $100 million and the board expects you to double that.
And to operate efficiently at that scale.
Right. Then the opposite, I moved into a company years ago. We were 15-16 million ARR when I walked in the door. The board's goal was to build it up to 65 to 75 in 3 or 4 years and then have an event of some kind. Okay. But when I walked in, they were overspending. They over-indexed terribly. It was a lot of good data, but the tech stack had 11 components to it. If I remember 6, maybe 7 of them required regular touch points and work from the reps, because back then there was a little less integration and less connective tissue where AI kind of glues it all together. Players like People.ai and Jiminy and a couple others, they do a really good job of gluing together all your systems to give you a cockpit or a dashboard that's distilled insights. But I walked in, you're 15-16 million in sales, and you have 11 systems. So my RevOps partner was pulling her hair out of her head because it was so much to maintain, administer, train, hire and train new people. And then something would go wrong and it's down for a couple of days and it affects two or three other systems too. So you could over index, you could under index. So I like to look at the tech stack. And nowadays, there's no perfect fit based on how AI has evolved and can help us. But there's a great way to simplify how many systems you have and put sellers in control of spending more of their time selling.
Wait, Mike, you just came to the fine point of this conversation. I talk with so many sales people, whether they are SDRs that are 3 months into the seat or field rep who are the lead rep on $20 million relationships, their number one complaint is, I am spending so much time feeding the machine, I don't have time to talk to prospects and customers. And Mike, are we allowed to swear on this podcast? That's bullshit. That's bullshit. Mike, one of my favorite books is Will It Make the Boat Go Faster by Ben Hunt Davis and Harriet Beveridge. And they talk about the experience of the British 8-person crewing team where they only had one job, and that was to get the boat down the river as fast as possible. And they were racing against other teams. And this was a multi-year story of the things that get in the way of that team being successful and the things that the team did together to be successful. And so, for instance, as a salesperson, if I have to choose between typing a report into CRM or making a call, it's likely, from my personal perspective, typing into CRM does not make the boat go faster. Making a call might make the boat go faster. Now, interestingly, the RevOps person might say, well, actually, putting that data into CRM does help the boat go faster, but that ain't my boat.
Right.
That's their boat. We need to figure out how to help reps to focus on making the boat go faster. It's literally getting the oar in the water. It's literally having the fitness, having the muscle memory, having the teamwork to be able to go down the river just a little bit faster or go down the course just a little bit faster than the other teams. Ben, I want to get you on the podcast. Harriet, I want to get you on the podcast. Please, we're going to have fun with that. Anyway, back to you, Mike.
You raise a really good point there. I don't have recent accurate stat, but just looking back over the last 5, 10, 20 years, especially when early in my career I was a seller and then moved through management ranks, the goal used to be, like my first handful of enterprise software sales jobs, the words out of my VP's mouth was, I want you to spend 3/4 of your time selling.
I remember those days fondly.
Yeah. And now over the last decade, if reps are spending 35% of their time selling, that's probably healthy, but not good for the company, right? Mm-hmm. So new tools and trends are slowly edging it back in the right direction, but there's also a big learning curve to use tools properly. So you still have to find that balance. When you talked about, hey, we dropped into a new company, CRO and like RevOps, sales enablement, the big thing for me outside of like the to-dos we discussed.
And we're not done.
Right. You have to impress upon your people, at least this is my own view, selfishly. I don't want to talk about twisting wires together. I don't want to talk about integration. I don't want to talk about how we solve a problem by coding, or that it might be part of a solution we provide and we have to earn that day in court and then crush it when that day comes and prove to people that we can do it. You have to prove your bona fides. However, I want to talk about business outcomes. I want my sellers and my VPs, I want them talking with business people about how we help their business move forward. And so if it's an outcome, you're either helping them grow revenue, you're helping them reduce OpEx, you're taking market share from a competitor, you're opening up a new market. There has to be an outcome attached to it, or a CFO just doesn't care. They just don't care.
I can think of a hypothetical salesperson at IBM, hi Rod, who used to sell IBM product. Now he talks about, when he's calling on a hospital, he talks about patient outcomes, right? Because that's what hospitals care about. So you've taken us into the conversation about value selling. How do you get salespeople to, and maybe this is a question for me on enablement, but I'm going to ask you because you chose to be the CEO, Mike. It's on you too. It's on both of us. How do you get the salesperson to have that business value conversation, to have that business outcome conversation?
Sometimes it's not easy based on the business you've been airdropped into. But I've always found that if you give salespeople a little bit of comfort in the tools that are in their bag, but they're not naturally disposed or inclined to sell that way. The right tools and watching peers do it and role playing and talking to each other and having a team that collaborates well, you can edge them in the right direction. So, for example, years ago, when I first joined a company called Rimini Street, and I spent nearly 8 years there, and we did a lot of good over a long period of time, but we didn't have enough collateral, case studies. Many companies don't, and we didn't. There were artifacts.
And yet Rimini Street was 100% outcome focused, right? That's all you did. You helped enterprise customers save money.
But they were not selling that way when I got there in 2012. Okay. So we had to start talking about not just cutting a maintenance bill in half and having guaranteed, OpEx reduction and money to spend, hire people, code, buy more SAP, buy more Oracle, do whatever you want to do. We had to start talking about a business case that maybe with the 20 million that you're saving, guaranteed as soon as you sign the contract, that 20 million drops to your bottom line. What are you going to do with it? Well, you might save 5 jobs. That was great. But what about avoiding the next big upgrade that you had to do on Oracle that was a forced upgrade because the 2-year window on being the oldest version 2 years back, N-2, was up, and you're going to go spend 150 million to deploy this globally, and there's not a single function that's really going to benefit you right now. So yeah, you're saving 20 million, but the business case is I can buy you 5 or 10 years to run your business and save that 150 million plus the opportunity cost of your whole team being consumed with doing that for the next 2 years. And you can drive your business forward and do 12 other things.
The ultimate focus on the revenue and what impact revenue savings might have. Mike, we just did a QBR, and it was our first QBR. Some of the reps were really well prepared, some were not. And we find that one of the regions isn't doing as well as the other regions. And we find some inconsistency in individual rep performance and manager performance, by the way. So what do we do next?
Punt? No.
Prepare 3 envelopes.
No, it's a good question. And you're always going to have some lumpy performance, right?
Absolutely. And we don't know whether it's lumpy because it's our first QBR.
Right. And everybody thinks, generically, you have to take care of all your great performers and put cotton balls around them and take great care of them. Of course you do. You want to take good care of them as long as they're good teammates and they collaborate and they share why they're winning and how they're winning. Otherwise, if they're no good and they don't collaborate internally, peanut gallery comment, you have to move them out. You have to, okay? Because they'll tear the walls down. But the middle performers, Matt Green, I don't know if you know Matt Green, he posts a lot on LinkedIn. He's a successful CRO, good guy. He just had a post the other day, talking about that the middle, the bell curve of those performers hovering around quota are the ones that are really the key to your success and they're your best reps. They work hard, right? They're always around the middle, but they're consistent. His point was every quarter, they're 98%, 102, 105, 90, but they're always around the Mendoza line.
You can count on them.
Right, of territory profitability. So you got to take care of them, and then you got to grow them. So you got to find out what's making them tick, and how can I make them 25% better?
You're going to push that over to sales enablement, aren't you, huh?
Well, I'm going to try, right?
And I'll take it.
But we'll do some trainings, right? And like, for example, one of the things that I've always enjoyed is, so having run a coaching and mentoring business on the side for many years, I've tended to really have a lot of the 20-somethings and 30-somethings that have reported up through me enjoy the conversation because they might be really successful to this point in their career or not. Most of the good ones, if you hire good people, good humans, hard workers, they're smart and they're kind of athletes in their mindset, right? Where they'll just keep breaking through walls and learning. They want the coaching. So you got to find the forums to talk with these people and find out what they're doing to fill their day. Not generically, right? Not getting feedback from their boss who did the one-on-one every Wednesday, but really talking with them and finding out what makes them tick. And then sometimes there's a training. In my last company, I had 5 sales VPs that reported to me, and I used to rotate, each one of them running a topic on our management team calls.
Oh, that's brilliant. You get a variety of inputs, a variety of perspectives.
And when I ran just a team or a region, I would do the same thing, right? I'd have my sellers each take a different topic They'd have anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months when we set the schedule out. And they would know that when their turn came up for the team call, weekly or biweekly, they were going to lead a conversation for 30 or 45 minutes, present a thesis on it, maybe a way that we can help the team, right, by doing more of this or something differently, take feedback, right? And then I used to parlay that into regularly doing target account meetings where reps would present to me and my management team their two biggest deals that they'd like to discuss in a wider forum, because it's either the deal that makes or breaks their quarter or their year, or it's just a good sized deal and they're stumped. They've hit a wall, they got an enemy in the account, they don't know where it is, it's a blind spot. And so I'd have them fill out a brief doc, and then they'd present for 5 minutes, take questions for 5 or 10 minutes, and then everybody's banging on LinkedIn. You have the whole team. I'd invite the whole executive team. Whoever can make it attends. And everybody's chiming in with different ways or strategies, or I won this deal doing this. Have you ever thought of doing that? And then lo and behold, a couple of these deals, when you do two of these during every team call, and I used to do these every 2 weeks, something breaks loose on one or two of them a month. And that's what sometimes all you need to get over the top.
What you're describing is applying the hive mind to individual opportunities.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. I'm going to steal that and use it liberally and attribute it to you.
Well, I appreciate it. I didn't create it. I had a couple of really good mentors that I saw bits and pieces of what they were doing with my sales teams when I was a young seller. And part of what I've enjoyed over the years is not being a loyalist to MedPick or Bant or whatever it is, Taz back in the day for target account selling, but really blending a methodology that makes the most practical use of time and just making sure that all of our sellers and leaders have a clear, unified understanding of deal vernacular, deal terminology. When you tell me that a deal's at 60%, or you tell me it's in contract mode at 80 or 90%, what does that mean? Because I have to go to the board and I have to put our integrity on the table for what you tell me. And I only want to tell them what you've told me with integrity. If it's missing something, let's bump it back a notch. Let's not put it in forecast and it's upside, right?
The last thing you want to do is to commit a deal to the board and then find out, well, maybe not. We aren't texting with the stakeholders. Oh, wait, you're not texting with the stakeholders?
Or you haven't had an update in 3 weeks.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, right.
Like there's been no touch point whatsoever. But I think the other thing is if there's a lumpy QBR where there's inconsistency, to go back to that theme, sometimes I've found early on, you can't take for granted that the company really knows their ICP.
Sure we do. It's anybody, everybody.
Well, that's where this story's going. Okay. So if we were sitting here sharing a cocktail, the punchline is that when I first talked to this CEO, okay, and I'll protect all the innocent because it was all well-intentioned, right?
Some of the guilty. Yeah.
The question was, for me, when interviewing, tell me about your ICP. And they told me that it was any company between 200 and 2,500 employees. And I kept a poker face on. I didn't know this man well. We were just 20 minutes into a couple hours talk. And I said, okay, let me kind of pause there for a second because I don't understand, right? A pearl of wisdom from my past was, seek to understand before being understood, right?
Uh-huh.
So I paused and I took a step back and I'm like, 200 to 2,500, that sounds like a TAM. That sounds like a target market.
I can find a large landscaping company that fits in there. I can find an AI startup that fits in there.
Right. And so I was like, help me understand. And his response was, no, I mean, we're a great fit for any company in any industry in that range. And I'm like, okay, well, I had to just chisel down the ICP. So we focused in that particular business, 400 to 800. If there were outliers, there had to be a very good reason for it. Certain industry niches, we were much more proven with lots of references to go up or down. So it made sense. But when you have to go and explain up the chain to the board, all these outlier deals in every board meeting, that's a recipe for disaster. And it's not really good for a CRO whose average tenure lasts like 17 months. Okay. And I'm okay with one or two outlier deals every quarter because there's a legitimate reason. The chairman of the board introduced us to somebody and they have 5,000 employees, but they love us. Okay, we're going to talk to them, right?
It's not just that they love us. That is not nearly sufficient to justify selling to them. They love us and it will be profitable business that brings value to the customer. If they love us, not sufficient.
I can explain one or two outlier deals a quarter. I can't explain like a third to a half of the pipeline. They're all outliers. So when you have that kind of a range, that's a TAM. So we tighten the ICP down because the company churn was twice the industry average when I walked in the door. Twice. Now, did that have a direct correlation to the ICP slash TAM? Probably, but there were other factors too, right? You have to deliver, you got to implement on time, you got to implement on budget, you got to stand up what you say you're going to do. But targeting the ICP early on is an enormous task that I think any CRO has to take a healthy look at to make sure you're putting the fishing line in the right waters before you start putting your neck on the line in front of the board.
As the CRO, you have external stakeholders, the customers, and you have internal stakeholders, the board, and we have to keep them all happy, as it were. If we keep the customers happy, it's going to be easier to keep the board happy. If we don't keep the customers happy, the board is not going to be happy, for starters.
No, and it's transparency, right? There's certain things that, you have to make a decision with your CEO. Is it something that the board needs to know? That's a simple yes or no. Do they deserve to know, right? They own the company. Then the second measure is how quickly do they need to know? So a lot of my leadership teams over the years, whoever's out there listening in the future, they're going to roll their eyes with laughter when they hear this, but bad news doesn't age well. It doesn't, right? And so when you have something that is material, whether it's on a key deal that's the needle mover for the quarter for the whole company, it's in forecast, or something else has happened, a big client is terminating their contract, or they're suing you, or who knows what, like material. That's not something that you arbitrarily decide as a CRO, right? As a CRO, we sign up for the vision of the CEO, and we can have an individual voice and voice that opinion to the CEO daily, weekly, never, just anything in between. But we sign up for the vision of the CEO.
And as a C-level executive, we don't just receive that vision, we need to help shape it.
Correct. So when it's bad news, I want my team telling me right away. And then it's up to me to talk with my CEO and collaborate on, one, can we fix this?
Yeah. Little pieces of bad news are called sales blockers, right? Right. Big pieces of bad news are called closed lost.
Or lost job.
Right? Well, that's an outcome.
Right, exactly. But this tied back to ICP, right? You're parachuted in. You have a new team that's coming in to run revenue and run the whole RevOps and sales enablement. There's a handful of things you have to do, and you have to instill the culture that we're going to work together. We win as a team, we lose as a team. We have to make sure that all of our sellers and our sales leaders collaborate well around the company. And you got to say thank you 3 times for every time you hear it from somebody else, because your extended deal team that helps you win deals, many of them do not work on commission. They know that you're the most highly compensated people in the company, and they're okay with it if you're a good person and you treat people well, which we all should.
You know who should get the flowers first, Mike, on a regular basis?
Who's that?
The contracts person.
Funny story, going back a number of years. I had a handful of very well-intentioned reps, really good reps I loved to work with. They were good people. They were good deal team people. They were facilitators like Julie McCoy, cruise director on the Love Boat kind of thing. And they were really good at spinning all the plates and staying on top of everything and orchestrating deals. But a handful of reps over a short window of time when we were crushing it and we were all moving really fast because business was great and a lot of stuff was happening, a handful of reps over about a 6-month period of time promised our legal team, who worked so hard on our contracts with us, and a handful of them were so good that they were really good business people, not just legal people, that we could let them sometimes take the mic because they treated customers really well, prospects really well. But they'd been promised, oh, you were instrumental in winning that deal. I owe you a bottle of wine. I owe you like dinner for 2 with your spouse. And a cluster of these things happened. And really good people, well-intentioned reps, never followed through and took care when I was aware of some of these comments being made, because as a rep, I prided myself on trying to take care of the deal team that helped me win.
Yep.
So what did I do? I took a couple of our key people, right? Our main lawyer and one of our guys who was on the retention side of the business at the time. And I took them to Vegas for a weekend,
Nice.
right? and we saw a show and we walked the strip and we gambled a bit and we had fun. And it was just a way to say thank you and remind them that I love my team and they all mean well and they've all taken care of you from time to time. But the stuff that sometimes falls through the cracks is the most important stuff. And we can't lose sight of that.
Yeah. Time after time, I would tell my teams, it's okay to leave your spouse at home when you go to club in Hawaii and instead take your favorite sales enablement person. Hasn't happened yet. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know what it is. Who's the one helping them to run those account planning sessions, to win those deals, to do those deal reviews? I don't know.
All kidding aside, a great step that a lot of companies don't do, but nowadays I'm starting to see it more, and we implemented it in a couple of my last few companies, is we reserve a handful of spots at President's Club for non-quota carrying people who really are indispensable on the deal teams. And when they get treated to 4 days in Hawaii and they can bring their spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other and kick back and have fun with the team that they're always like working so hard with, it changes them to the point where they want to get back there next year and be voted onto the island again. So it's contagious and makes others jealous and they want to get there.
I got to tell you, I don't remember exactly how they did it, but when I worked for a systems company many, many years ago, sales engineers went with reps. I went on a handful of quota busting trips to various places, Florida and Lake Tahoe and other places, as part of the team, right? The SEs went with the A's. It can be done systemically, but it costs too much. What's the immediate return?
I usually would counter something like that by saying, look, we have a certain budget for club. I get it. But what's the cost of not rewarding the people that really helped win these deals? Because they don't make commissions. They might be in a company bonus pool and they get a couple grand a quarter or something like that if we hit our numbers. But what's the cost of losing the best solution consultant in the company because they don't feel appreciated, right?
Absolutely. It's so funny because in my experience, account after account where the rep might turn over every couple of years, either because of individual turnover or because of territory reshuffling, the reps would churn and the SEs or SCs would remain. And so when I was doing account planning at Oracle, I had SCs who had been on accounts for 5+ years. In fact, I had one SC who had worked for the account for a number of years and then came to Oracle. And boy, was he a wealth of information. So, right. And he stuck with that account for as long as he was at Oracle because he knew all the back doors, so to speak. So, Mike, we've covered the QBRs. We've already covered club, which means we've already finished the year. What else do we want to cover? What else? What's the one other magic step, one other magic point in sales leadership or sales management that we haven't yet talked about?
Boy, there's so much. You just gave me a whiteboard to paint.
That might have to be volume 2.
I will say, as a CRO, I don't find it critical that marketing reports to me. If you have a great marketing leader, you want them to have a voice, especially if they were there before you, right? As long as they're a great partner.
You want to be working in collaboration.
Exactly. As long as they're a great partner to me, no problem. Finish each other's sentences, work closely.
And I feel very strongly about sales enablement as being a partner to sales leadership and not a service provider.
Oh, right? Yeah.
I've seen it both ways. At Oracle, we were partners to sales leadership. We worked with them. We told them what we saw. We made strong recommendations on what we needed to do. And sometimes I'll never forget, my manager and I were talking about a particular project, and we said, this is the right thing to do. And my manager said, but they won't sign off on it. They won't want to take the time. And I said to him, let's not tell them. Let's just go do it.
Right.
And we got thanked afterwards. We were embedded. We saw what was going on day to day. I spent 10 days a month in the New York sales office working with reps and seeing how they sold. I didn't need to survey people or ask sales leadership, what do you need? We went and told them, here's what we're seeing. Here's what we recommend. Here's what we intend to do. In other organizations, it's trickled down. Hey, update the content on Seismic. Why? Does anybody use it? No, but it needs to be updated.
Well, what's such a challenge is we talk about tech stacks, we talked about 11 systems or nothing but Zoom Info and Outlook and everything in between. One of the real challenges is I came into an organization years back where in conversations during interviews, I asked about sales ops. Now the in vogue term is rev ops, which is fine. So encompassing the revenue. And I was told, oh, we have a person. I was like, okay, how senior, how junior? Just give me an idea. Mid-level, talented, smart, knows what to do.
Yeah.
And Then the CEO proceeded to tell me that it's a person on the FP&A team and they allocate about 10 hours a week to sales. And, this wasn't like a million a year ARR company, right? This was a 25 million a year company. You need more than 10 hours a week just to do any of the things we've covered on this call. Reshaping territories, comp plans, ICP, training, sales enablement of tools, tech stack. So you need somebody who's full-time dedicated and has the talent to collaborate with all the other teams around the company to find out what people need and really be my partner and like right arm to help make the engine go.
Good sales. I mean, I spent a lot of time working with sales operations executives across a variety of organizations, including some of the best performing organizations in the world. Any one of those sales ops leaders, now rev ops, any one of those sales ops leaders could have stepped into sales leadership role because they understood how sales work. They understand the motivation. They chose to be on the operations side because they had a different set of skills as their primary set of skills. And they understood the forces on their peers in sales leadership.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, another analogy is I've had a lot of success over the years taking people that were on the solution consulting, the product consulting side, supporting the sellers, earning commissions, but a much smaller plan because they support multiple people, right? And they become so enamored with the fact that sometimes they're doing more work than a new AE is doing that if they're really talented, I've had a lot of great success in converting some SCs over to becoming account executives if they're outgoing, they're willing to prospect and hunt and be the relationship builder at the tip of the iceberg, right? If you have somebody who's crushed it on the rev ops or sales enablement side, frankly, they can run the business, not just revenue, because they understand like the ingredients to baking the omelet, right? And a lot of sellers are very good at selling. But one thing I've learned over the years is my best sellers are more than a product marketing brochure and then they just shepherd the right troops in to answer tough questions. A buyer's done about 2/3 of their homework now in this day and age before they ever engage with you. That seller has to be competent to have a business conversation and to answer a handful of really detailed questions potentially to set the hook. And if you can't set that hook and change their thinking, what I call reframe the lens, you're dead. The deal goes nowhere.
It's so easy now for a buyer. We've said for many, many years that buyers are smarter than sellers. And Matt Dixon's book, The Jolt Effect, reinforced that. It's like, stop giving customers information. They don't need your information. They have the information. To put a sharp, really sharp point on it, I don't know, a month or two ago, I sat down to spec out an AI-based sales training platform just for shits and grins. I said, okay, I have 5 minutes to go through the entire process. 5 minutes. Sat down with, pulled up ChatGPT. I said, what are the top platforms and what should I think about, right? What should I consider? Gave me a thorough analysis with a list of 10 companies, some I'd heard of and some I hadn't. And then it asked, would you like me to write an RFP for you? I could have gone to the market with an RFP, like with all the detail that I would need at a first level pass. I could have asked ChatGPT to dig down to a second or third level. And then I would have had, as a real buyer, I would have had my business context. I could have asked, why is this important to me? How does this affect me? And so I was prepared in a very short period of time. Sellers need to shift from the supplying information, as you said, supplying information to having the business focus and helping customers make decisions, which again is Matt Dixon's point in the Jolt Effect. Help them make decisions.
And part of helping them make decisions is some of that difficulty or friction that even good sellers years ago used to insert. That has to go away. You have to be friendly and you have to be a facilitator. The way I like to manage, I always describe it as sometimes you lead from the front, sometimes you lead from the rear, right? You empower your people from the back sometimes, other times you're out in front leading the way. And I think good sellers nowadays have to lead from behind. They have to lead the sales process. They have to steer it where they need it to go, of course. They're coin operated, right? Compensation drives behavior.
Absolutely, as we talked about before.
But you can't be so difficult unless you're like, the king of a market and you've got like a 2-year window, if not 1 year, and you're crushing it and you're taking names and turning business away, which most companies are not doing today.
Most
right?
companies are not. Yep.
So I got to ask you one question.
Yeah.
Before we run short of time. So when you talk to peers of mine, CEOs in industry, CROs, what would be to flip the mic back to you, what would be like the biggest pearl of wisdom, like the greatest epiphany or learning you've had, say, in this past year that helps people like me be better at our jobs?
That's a good question, Mike. I'll answer it in a couple of parts. One, you talked before about the ICP and about the business value proposition. It's been my experience that even as you and I and others talk about it from the top down, from the bottom up, not happening. If you look at professional athletes, for instance, how much time do they spend practicing versus how much time do they spend playing? Typical athlete spends 90 to 95% of their time not playing, practicing. Professional painter, if I had someone paint my house and the inside of my house, 90% of the time they'd spend prepping, moving, spackling, sanding, taping, mixing, choosing paint, right? 10% of the time they'd have a brush in their hand. We look at salespeople, how much time do they spend in deliberate practice, building muscle memory? In many cases, the answer is 0. You go from 90 to 0. That's a systemic failure. That's not a failure from the part of the salesperson. It's a systemic failure from sales leadership and sales enablement leadership, where we are not giving people the tools to be successful. We're giving them the information. We're not helping them develop the muscle memory, because in the moment, the salesperson can't think, do I say this or do I say that? They have to be able to react. Daniel Pink says in To Sell is Human, improv and sales is one of the same. In improv, I speak from experience. When you're on stage and your partner says 3, 2, 1, you don't have time to think, is this an alphabetic string? Is it 3 nonsensical characters? Is it what? You just respond. And over time, and I've seen good improv partners, and you see this on What's My Line, you see good improv partners, man, they are so fast and they are so good. That's how top salespeople behave. That's how they perform. Customer makes a statement, boom, off they go, right? Same thing. And the opposite is, I was running a power hour with some inside salespeople once, and a rep got someone on the phone, right? It was on the speakerphone. There were 8 of us sitting around the room listening. Person said to the customer, I understand that you're involved with this project. I'd like to talk with you about how we can make that project work better. And the customer said, well, you must have seen that on my LinkedIn. So I appreciate you putting in that research time, but I've moved on to a different project. And the rep said, oh, okay, thanks, goodbye. Because he didn't have the muscle memory. He didn't have the self-awareness to pivot into multiple different directions. One is, that's great. How did that project go? Is there someone else on it now? And now what project are you on? Right? He had 2 pain funnels he could have identified and gone down. Instead, he just disconnected. And so it's because he hadn't had the deliberate practice of the pivot.
Yeah. It's interesting. You just like a synapse fired as you were kind of talking your way through that. Practice is easily 80+% of anybody's time, right? If you're going to be good at your craft.
And research is different than practice.
True. But think of the history of software. Like when I grew up selling and then started managing teams and running revenue orgs, it was finding solutions that were compelling for me, drove outcomes, tangible ROIs to solve business problems. Now, the business problems that the majority of VC funded and even a bunch of PE acquired companies is all around, it's still outcomes, but it's helping the software companies run their sales orgs better. That's why LinkedIn has become literally like this, the big deep end of the pool in LinkedIn is everybody selling to all the sellers and leaders and CEOs and CROs and CMOs, right? So maybe the next offshoot of that star schema of selling to the startups to run their sales and RevOps business better is helping sellers prepare better versus AI to help them manage their forecast better, or tie all the channels together, like we talked about earlier. It's probably you can almost gamify that too. And there's some different things out there.
It's been done. My friend Stephanie Boyer, who is a director of marketing at Bryant University, was involved with Rainmaker software for a while, which is one of those tools to help reps undertake deliberate practice. Jonathan Mahan runs the Practice Lab, which focuses on deliberate practice. There are organizations that do that. You asked me, what should a sales leader know?
Yeah.
Sales leader needs to know that deliberate practice is critical for effectiveness in the sales organization.
So there needs to be more of an ecosystem rather than a handful of good players. There needs to be a wider swath of funded companies that are solving those problems, which is part of, like when I talked about the reps that we should be paying the most attention to are the ones hovering around the Mendoza line, right around their quota, steady Eddie, right? They work hard, they deliver, they're just not superstars today. And there's a lot of reasons why. Get those players to increase their performance by 20 or 25% from 90 to 105 to like 115, 120, 125. And now you're crushing numbers and making up for all the new hires that haven't ramped yet. And you're overcoming challenges of somebody left or you had to make somebody leave. It could fix some holes pretty quick.
Yeah. We could also suggest that first line managers actually spend some time coaching and role playing.
A lot of first line managers, truthfully, they like running deals. They just like
That's
running
because they
deals.
were former reps.
Right.
They're former lone wolves that have done well.
And that's the change into management where you still have to be able to flip the hat around, run a deal if necessary, answer a question if necessary, know how to structure a pipeline and forecast like it was your own as a rep. But once you're in leadership, your first team is not your sales team. It doesn't mean you don't care about your sales team. Of course you care about them. Their success is tied to your success. But your first team is your executive leadership team, your CEO, it's the executive peers. And you've got to be able to have those conversations in collaboration with them. And so bringing some tools that you could demonstrate, hey, I just helped provide like a coaching cockpit for all of my reps to spend 2 extra hours per week. That's it. 2 hours a week.
Yep.
And now a quarter later, they're all doing better. They're answering questions more on their own. They're able to dynamically think on their feet and think like business people and have a conversation without being a deer in the headlights sometimes, right? It's a great point. Let me know when you want to start one of those. We'll layer some AI on it and we'll have some fun doing some coaching and mentoring.
That sounds like a plan. In the interim, Mike, we probably need to wrap because I'm running out of tape here. We talked about a bunch of really interesting stuff. A couple of key takeaways. No great surprise. Comp plans drive behavior, drive performance, drive success. You mentioned the tech stack. I'm more a believer in the people and process than tech. I focus on people first. In fact, in 7-8 years at Oracle, I never touched a technology tool once unless we would include PowerPoint in that. We were a field enablement team. We talk about value selling as an approach to optimize customer engagement. You mentioned the hive mind approach to, or opportunity account planning, right? Getting the team involved in picking apart a deal and making recommendations on how to move it forward with velocity, which is brilliant. That's a key takeaway for me. Mike, thanks for the time. This has been fun as always to get together with you, and we look forward to doing it again. Thanks, Mike.
That was wonderful. Thanks for having me, Lee.
Of course. Another deep dive into the topic of sales excellence and the performance mindset. If you found this conversation interesting, I would appreciate it if you would share the podcast with a coworker or two. And to explore this topic in more depth, send me a note via the contact form on podcast.thoughtsonselling.com or find some time for us to talk at meet.acellergroup.com. Thanks.